Hello and welcome everyone. Today I am here to present my paper entitled Higher Education ESL Curriculum Transition Post-COVID-19, a Systematic Review. Now, before we get into the main study, let me briefly introduce some terms and abbreviations that are highlighted in my study so that it'll be easier for you to follow me through this presentation. HEI is an abbreviation for Higher Education Institution, while ESL curriculum stands for English as a Second Language Curriculum. Another frequent term is curriculum transition, which means the shift from conducting face-to-face class to an online platform due to the events of COVID-19, which will be discussed later on in this presentation. Introduction. Let's look into how this research has come to be. The World Health Organization, or WHO, has officially characterized the outbreak of COVID-19 as a global pandemic since March 11, 2020, following an alarming level of spread and severity reported from across the globe as quoted by McKibben and Fernando. This has directly impacted various industries and businesses. The education sector is one of the many fields that has been badly affected by this pandemic. Teaching and learning activities were halted, which left many educational institutions scrambling to find the best solution or alternative to having the conventional way of conducting a teaching and learning session, which is offline classes and lectures. This is where the transition to online distance learning takes place, causing HEI instructors to be anxious as they are abruptly forced to transfer their teaching and assessment activities to an online platform. So what is it about this issue and why is it important? As we approach towards an era of the new normal, a time where we need to accept that the pandemic is not going away anytime soon, the goal of education is to develop a curriculum model that is relevant, effective, and practical when another wave of global pandemic strikes. Hence, this brings us to the current study, and that is to conduct a systematic literature review in order to understand the challenges of ESL lecturers or instructors from HEI on how to adapt to the curriculum post-COVID-19. I specifically chose ESL lecturers or instructors as the subject of my study, as I have always been interested with the ESL curriculum development in the higher education level. With that, let's dive briefly into the literature review. As highlighted from several studies related to the pandemic and its educational implication, the COVID-19 pandemic has heavily affected lecturers and instructors in higher educational institutions, who had to abruptly shift to an online platform and away from the conventional method. According to Peymani and Kamalipur, the instant transition from face-to-face to online learning has made a significant impact on the teaching and learning activities, evaluation, and assessment. Previous research on the challenges faced by ESL instructors towards online distance learning can be cited by the likes of Rinexo and Muslim and Atmojo and Nugroho. Rinexo and Muslim emphasized that poor internet access, accumulation of unread chats, and misinterpretation of tasks were one of the major challenges faced during online distance learning. Meanwhile, Atmojo and Nugroho mentioned that planning and preparation were one of the main concerns among ESL instructors during remote teaching and learning, since online learning demands for a more thorough knowledge and skills in terms of technological integration. Furthermore, the researchers also added that apart from the challenges of relating pedagogy to technology, ESL instructors were also met with the challenges of designing an interactive course, reinforce formal learning, and maintaining student engagement. Let's look into the main objective of this review paper, which is to investigate the past literature of the challenges of ESL instructors from higher education institutions on how they adapted to the current curriculum post-COVID-19 by identifying publications that create awareness about the challenges and trends of online teaching and learning. This entails the research question of this study, which is 1. What are the challenges instructors have to deal with amid the COVID-19 pandemic? And 2. How did ESL instructors make adjustments to cope with the curriculum transition? Methodology. For methodology, I utilize the preferred reporting items for systematic reviews and meta-analysis 2020, or most commonly known as PRISMA 2020, which helped in guiding me throughout the process of identifying and screening the articles that were relevant in retrieving the research question. The databases that I have selected in conducting my search was Scopus and ProQuest. The first step in starting the search is formulating the research question. After forming the research question, a preliminary search using relevant keyword is done in the selected database. Then after that, I can determine the search terms for the identification of articles. This is the search term or search phrase that I decided to use in identifying the articles that I needed. Before the database search, I set up a selection criteria consisting of inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria. The inclusion criteria for this review were articles involving online distance learning in higher education, 2. Focused on teaching English as a second language, and 3. The full text was available. The exclusion criteria were articles that focused on students in higher education as well as teachers and ESL learners below tertiary education. 2. Articles that were published in other language other than English. And 3. Papers that were published before the events of COVID-19. For quality assessment of the article, I used the Joanna Briggs Institute, or JBI, Prevalence Critical Appraisal Tool based on the critical appraisal tool developed by Mann et al. In 2014. The JBI is a checklist that identifies the important criteria when evaluating systematic reviews of prevalence. It includes 9 criteria that needs to be responded with either a yes, no, or unclear. For this study, a score of 1 will be counted if the article affirms to the given criteria, and a score of 0 will be counted for articles that did not fit into the criteria. The 9 criteria can be described in the following table. To extract data from the final primary article, information such as the author, year of publication, journal title, country of where the research was conducted, and the relevant findings of the research article were tabulated. Moving on to the results. Using the search phrases in the database search, I was able to gather what I needed, giving me an initial 933 articles through the database. After duplicate articles were removed, there was a total of 930 articles. I then screened the article through titles and abstract, and that leaves me to a total of 83 articles. I did more skimming and excluded an additional 65 articles. After reading the article that was left, I excluded an additional 12 articles, leaving me with 6 final primary articles that contain my inclusion criteria. As I mentioned before in the data extraction method, this is the result of the final primary article being sorted out according to the author, year, title of journal, country, and the relevant findings of the article. The results of the quality assessment is also recorded, and each article evidently shows a total score that is relatively fair. In the discussion section, it involves answering the research question and objective. The discussion focuses on the online distance learning experience faced by ESL instructors in higher educational institution and what adjustments they made in response to the curriculum transition. The challenges faced by ESL instructors during the curriculum transition post-COVID-19 based on the systematic review reveals that most ESL instructors experience low confidence in handling online classes as they were pressured with the unfamiliarity of heavily relying to technology as a medium of instruction. While students took their time in adjusting to learning autonomously, instructors may also be troubled with designing and coming up with a strategy on how to present their content effortlessly through online learning. Sia and Adamu made a comprehensive literature review on the challenges and impacts of the pandemic towards instructors working at HEI in Malaysia. The findings of their study indicated that the primary challenge for instructors during online distance learning throughout the COVID-19 era is that they need to learn how to navigate the learning management system in just a short amount of time before resuming class via online. ESL instructors from HEI were also met with the obstacle of having to conduct summative assessments and examinations online. As there was a great need to maintain social distancing among students to avoid the spread of the COVID-19 virus, HEI were forced to conduct examinations virtually. Moreover, another challenge that was prominently mentioned was having to deal with students' lack of engagement and low attendance rate throughout the period of online distance learning. It was reported that students were having less learning engagement as there were factors such as students having a hard time accessing the online learning content. First and foremost, students are required to have technology and internet access as the primary tool of online learning. In a study by AJ and Vijaya Lakshmi, students are the most affected by the lockdown in terms of technical difficulty and adapting to remote learning. Adjustments made to cope with the curriculum transition. One of the recommended strategies in coping with the challenges of this curriculum transition is to introduce a language learning community to students as well as instructors. A quantitative study at HEI in Oman was conducted by Ayat and Al-Aufi that focuses on English Foundation students' perspective of using interactive websites in enhancing their listening and speaking skills. The researchers found that majority of the ESL students showed positive response to the online learning tool as they were exposed to real-life conversational situation, which made them become aware of the different English that people from different parts of the world uses, depending on the cultural background of the language user. Meanwhile, for students' assessment, instructors have prepared various forms of assessment to measure students' performance throughout the course. A study by Singh et al. Was conducted to analyze the forms of assessment and feedback that lecturers, including a handful of ESL lecturers from various Malaysian HEI, are currently practicing. oral questioning and peer assessment emerge as the most frequent mode of giving students assessment, while providing comments and immediately responding and correcting students' answers and mistakes were the most preferred form of feedback. The lecturers then explain that their strategy to execute oral questioning and peer assessment is through instructing their students to work in groups and conduct class presentations, respectively. Conclusion. Within the context of ESL curriculum in HEI, there is an urgent need for increased investment in improving online learning resources, both in higher education institutions as well as in the tertiary education community due to gap in aspects such as socio-economic levels and geographical factors in accessing information and communication technologies, or ICTs. Considering that we are in an era of the new normal post-COVID-19, higher educational institution needs to plan ahead in rethinking their curriculum, which emphasizes on preparedness in times of a pandemic outbreak as a goal. That is all from me. I hope that it contributed to the body of research, even if it's just a small fraction of it. Thank you, and I sincerely appreciate your attention.